All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us so much. I am Amanda Wiria, and I'm the Manufacturing Support Manager at Wepco Plastics. And we are so thrilled to be here with our third webinar for Manufacturing Mania Month. And I have three of our big advocates for manufacturing in the state of Connecticut, as well as some inspiring leaders here. So I'm going to go around and let them all introduce themselves. Glenn, do you mind starting off?
No, thank you very much, Amanda. I'm Glenn Ford. I'm president here at Phoenix Manufacturing in Enfield, and we manufacture aerospace components, primarily a machine shop.
Thanks, Glenn, and welcome. And Charles?
Hello, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles Daniels, and I work at Wepco Plastics in Middlefield, Connecticut. We are an injection mold builder and an injection molder. Thanks for having me.
And Ron, we are glad to have you join us today too.
Amanda, thank you. I'm Ron Angelo, the president and CEO of the Connecticut Center for Advanced Technology. We are in our 16th year. We basically look at the validation, demonstration, and adoption of leading edge technologies, and we get out there and demonstrate to the supply chain, to the manufacturing community, and we help train their workforce and provide a host of services. It's a great honor for me to lead an incredible team of professionals. So it's great to be here today.
Well, thank you. We are so glad to have the three of you, and I think it's going to be a great fit for our discussion on leadership. We've got a large company like Phoenix Manufacturing, a family-owned company that's a little bit on the smaller side, like Wepco, and then Ron, who works in the nonprofit sector, who also helps companies like us work on our culture and our retention and our diversity. So I want to start today off by putting each of you in the hot seat with a question. And we're going to start off with the one that I think has been going around the most through different webinars and sessions. But with everything that has gone on recently in these uncertain times, how would you say that leading through these times, you have motivated and ensured a sense of security in your teams? Glenn, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you. Wow, tricky question, but easy to answer. You know, when COVID reared its ugly head, and you know, it created a significant amount of uncertainty. Immediately, what was required, I believe, from a leadership team, is to immediately sit down and start to discuss what those uncertainties created with respect to different types of risk. So, for instance, you know, we in March, we're talking about testing. We were talking about wearing masks. We were talking about what do we do in our workplace to make it a safe environment, not just for us, but for the entire workforce, and then our community as well, because our workforce is considered essential, and we had to go back out into our community, primarily at that time to go back home. So we immediately circled the wagons, started to talk about what we could do to be able to, first and foremost, categorize what the COVID virus meant. There's a point in time where, you know, we just had a few things that we needed to do to close the doors and wipe things down, all the way through a continuum where all of a sudden we have to maybe shut down our facility. And what we would have to do at each phase of those different steps through that continuum. That was number one. And then number two, we made it mandatory to wear masks. It wasn't, you know, the governor's executive order wasn't even out at that point in time, but it just seemed common sense for us to say, you have to wear a mask. You know, it will prevent somebody else from getting that COVID germ. And then we started to clean, and so many other different things that I mean, we could go on for another 15, 20 minutes on it. The ending result was we took action. We didn't wait. We made decisions, and we implemented a plan early. And I believe because we did that, it helped us out at Phoenix to not spread this germ, and then also to keep folks employed, and then ultimately not go back into the community and spread it even further.
I think a big thing we picked up on there, Glenn, is the communication that you guys kept at Phoenix as you developed this plan and employed it, and making sure that your team knew what was going on and knew where you guys were headed? And a big thing that helped with that throughout our manufacturing community as well is what Ron started with, the AMAP weekly webinars. I think that was a great way to encourage all of us to keep the leaders on the same page with the state and the manufacturers, as well as the nonprofit sector. Ron, do you want to share a little bit about your thoughts on how that really helped to encourage the leaders during this time?
Yeah, I mean, I think playing off certainly what Glenn started saying, the first thing is obviously communication. Leading through difficult times, challenging, uncertain times requires consistent communication and very clear messaging. One thing that CCAT did is we obviously developed a plan. I'm sure like Phoenix and Webco had, what's the plan? But we sent our plan out to our employees and our team members and let them comment about the plan. So they knew what we were thinking. They were hopefully confident that we were putting something together, and they actually had buy-in. They were able to participate and contribute to the plan. So messaging, communication, being very clear, having a plan, but to the webinar standpoint, staying focused on your business. We didn't get distracted. We didn't get pulled off in 100 different ways. We said, look, how do we continue to do the work we do, convening the groups we do, get the messaging out. And at first, the webinars, we talked a lot about COVID. And then as soon as we could, started pivoting it off and started saying, hey, we have to think about how the business is run. So, I think leading decisively like that was important. But, one of the things personally for me that shifted is very, very quickly, it was, as you came in each day, it wasn't, what's our revenue number? How are we doing? How's the business? It was about how are the people doing? All of a sudden, empathy got way more important than the balance sheet. Are people healthy? What's going on at home? Work was some minor piece compared to what some people were going through at home with their children or the caring of a loved one. So it shifted quite a bit to the personal side of the relationships versus just a professional side. So.
Oh, that's a great point. We'll go right to Charles on that one, who is our CFO at Webco, and obviously his main focus is, that balance sheet and helping us generate revenue. When this all started, Charles went mainly remotely at that point. So it was a kind of a unique situation for us, having him at home and really needing to shift where we were focusing during the pandemic. Charles, do you want to share a little bit with us about that?
Yeah, so I happened to be on a trip in Europe when all of this crazy stuff started happening, and I had to try to rush home before. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it home. So at that point, when I came back, the responsible thing to do was to stay remote. And then during that time when I was remote, the office area got taken over by more manufacturing schools to make PPE. So at that point, I had to adjust to working 100% remote. But for us, very similar to what Ron and Glenn said, we had to educate ourselves that there was so much uncertainty going on, and it was our responsibility as leaders to be able to provide as much certainty as we could. People had so many things going on. They're worried about loved ones, they're worried about themselves, they're worried about their job, their health, all these crazy things. So we really saw it as our role to make sure that we were a rock and that we were something that was going to be consistent. Even though we had to make some changes and do some things differently, we were very careful to explain all those things and realize and let people know that the reason that we're making these changes is because we truly value your safety. And we had to be flexible. We had to realize that people had something going on with like a child situation or another loved one. We had to make allotments for that, because at the end of the day, our people are what matter most. So, and I feel like we did a really good job of that. And so I'm proud of the work that was done by the leadership at Webco.
It definitely gave a different element to our leadership throughout the pandemic, because I know it did at Phoenix and CCAT as well. And one thing that I think has been a common theme for our team as well as for you guys as leaders is, how do you balance your time and your energy, make sure that your team is getting everything that they need from you, as well as you're keeping enough fuel in the tank to keep yourself and the companies going. Ron, you want to share first? I see that smile on your face. We'll start with you.
I'm a little bit of an odd duck here on that one. You know, a lot of us get up at early morning, and you know, so it's very much a balance. Family always comes first, no matter what. And the people at CCAT, I'm sure laugh. They've actually heard me sometime talking to my father. You know, that comes first. I would almost be upset with somebody if they had a call coming in from a family member. They didn't take the call. You know, that's really important. So. Yeah, you got to balance family. You have to balance your personal life. I mean, certainly in this day and age, doing what we're doing today, I think many of our mornings start much earlier and they go much later, and they're actually no breathing room during the day because we can click so easy. And you don't have to sometimes you get in a car to drive to a meeting, you had some downtime, you roll down the window, roll down the window, I just dated myself, put some music on, and you have a good time. But now it's just this constant barrage. So you have to find time to clear your head. You have to have some sort of personal life, some activity, some wellness, well-being, even a degree of spirituality to know that you're grounded in what you're doing. And you've got to balance that you know, good diet, good health, good healthy distractions somewhere. And I think, as you said, you've got to keep your energy level up. So I won't talk about what I eat either, but we do you know, we do that good kind of thoughtful, you know, thinking to do your day.
I like that. That was good. Thanks, Ron. And all right, so Glenn, as you continue to grow and develop as a leader, which has been essential for you succeeding from, you know, an apprentice all the way to where you are now, if you had to give some young leaders some tips, what would you give them that they should spend the most time trying to really grow and develop?
Well, I think if I were an old Glenn talking to my young Glenn way back in, well, it wasn't quite the Wright brothers flight crew, but it was quite a while ago. I think I'd go back and I'd tell the young Glenn, take your time, learn, listen. You know, a lot of times I hear people saying, you know, the millennials and the new generation are just, they all think they're entitled. I don't buy into that. I think we all thought we were entitled when we were younger. And that's a good thing, because confidence really drives you, especially as a leader, in a direction that other people can follow. They'll say he's confident or she is confident in the direction that they're going. And, you know, as a result, I feel confident. So I would tell young Glenn, you know, listen, learn, absorb as much as you possibly can. And don't really think you're entitled, because you're not. You have to earn it. But, you know, be confident in moving forward. I would also say that, you know, a good leader takes into account multiple personalities. Not one person is the same as another, In fact, on my wall over here, you might be able to see it. I have a picture that is of the seven dwarfs. And there's a reason why I have the seven dwarfs up on the wall. And seven dwarfs are different people. Each individual in there is completely different than the other. But they give us a good lesson in that they all can work together. They all understand each other, and they still love each other. They go home at the end of the day. They're whistling while they work. They follow each other. They're having a ball. Everybody is different. Don't ever think that diversity, that difference is something that you shouldn't embrace, because, in fact, that's what makes us more powerful. You know, there's a saying out there that, you know, that I would tell the young Glenn, you know, you always do want to find the smarter person than you are for the job. And that doesn't mean that they're smarter than you. What it means is they're smarter than you in another thing. So that diversity, that different person, that different personality, the quiet person, the loud person, the funny person, it doesn't mean that they're bad people if they look at each other and think that they're different. What it does mean is they're different, and they can absolutely add to the whole. So those are probably three of the key things that I would tell the young Glenn.
That's great. We may have to get a Seven Dwarfs and Snow White poster and hang it at WEPCO. We'll put it in Charles's office. And that leads into something I was going to ask Charles is, we did DISC personality test a while ago at Webco. We had everybody in the company take them. And it was a big learning tool for us as leaders, but also to see our team and the variety of talent and different personalities we had. And I know it made a big impact on Charles as a leader and his decision making and the way that he communicated with us after that.
Yeah, so it goes on to say, people talk about leadership styles, and it's something that I always remember, like in business school, what we talked about, had this whole section on what's your leadership style and defining your leadership style. And I've come to realize, and through a lot of things, this included, that you can't have a leadership style. You have to customize that for everyone. So I thought that Glenn's reference to the seven dwarfs was brilliant, because it's so true, everything that he said. And so for me, and actually one of your mentors, Amanda, Misty Rogers, mentioned on a webinar earlier today about how the DISC assessment is so important, and it's not what's on the first couple pages. I think she said it's like go right to page 7, because it's not about yourself, it's about everyone else and how you interact with them. So people like to read all about what their personality traits are. But one of the things for me was so important is when I'm saying something, what are you, who's a different personality type, how are you interpreting that? And when you come in and say something to me, what are you looking for? So just to give a quick example, I'm a real kind of quick to the point person. So I wasn't necessarily someone that was going to come in and say, ask about your day or your weekend or whatever. I had a question on my mind. I'm going to walk in, I'm going to ask that question and look for a response, and then I'll leave. But I know now that some people may misinterpret that, and while they may give me the answer, they may have, I'll leave and they'll have like a sour taste in their mouth. And so now I realize when I approach somebody else, I have to approach them in a manner that best suits their means of communication. And so that's been a big learning process for me that I'm still going through, because I'm still not really good at it, especially with my personality type, which is a D, high D. But I'm doing my best, and it's something that I'll work on probably the rest of my life.
That's great. Thank you. I'm glad you brought Missy up. That's going to take us into something else. Something that we've done at Webco recently is Charles is a mentor through one of our manufacturing organizations. And we have a couple of our young leaders that are mentees, and we have gotten so much value from that. I personally have gotten a lot out of it. It's nice to have someone in that leadership role, but also someone who's in your industry and they know where you've been. Charles helped me a little bit with this, and we were writing the description, but I think between the three of you, we probably have a combined, don't kill me, Glenn, 80 years of leadership experience. So I know to have gotten you there.
Bringing up the brunt of that, yeah.
There are definitely people that helped you get there. So Ron, I'd love to hear about, who was one of the greatest leadership mentors in your life, and what was the most impactful thing that they gave you?
I mentioned my dad. It goes back to my upbringing. I mean, he exposed me at a very young age to business. He would take me on job sites. He would take me in front of customers. So I could see it firsthand, how he spoke to people, how he made people feel. They were more important than him. He showed up at a meeting. You're more important to me. What you have to say is more important than what I have to say. And he's always continued to instill that, and that people on your team are the most important things. Leaders look great. When you have a great team, it's pretty easy. It's always the team behind you. It's how you develop things, certainly internally, but with a great team, leadership becomes, first of all, much more enjoyable, and much easier to do. And that's why it's great to work with the team. But, mentoring is certainly very important. I've had multiple ones, though, over the years. I can't say that one stands out. I've had a host of different experiences in finance and in running my own business, and then certainly with the state. And I was always fortunate enough to be able to do a lot of listening and observing of people that were in leadership positions that I was able to to get some good information from. I don't mean this in a silly way with Glenn and Charles being on the phone, but I'm an emerging leader even today. I never envisioned trying to lead through a global pandemic. That was not in the playbook. Had to do a lot of it on the fly, but just the webinars and my interaction with Glenn and Charles, things about culture, they may not know it, but I almost always take something away from what these two say all the time. And I think that's because as a leader, I need to listen. I need to make sure, hey, that was really great. I got to take that one with me. So, I'm fortunate enough to just be surrounded, even including right now, with really great people. And it makes things enjoyable, but makes things a little bit easier to navigate.
Thank you. That was good, Ron. I think that's probably going to go into a little bit of what Glenn's going to share, a common theme, the listening, and that your team is more important.
Well, a couple things I want to touch on. One of the best leaders that I ever was mentored by was a guy named Lloyd, and his air name was Fig Newton. Lloyd Newton, or Fig as we call him, was a first 4-star general colored person in the Air Force. He flew slot for Thunderbirds. The guy is just phenomenal. He is bigger than life itself. And he's got, when you go through the St. Louis airport, he's got a room that's dedicated, that's just got pictures of him, portraits, paintings all over the place. So why is he important to me? He came to work at Pratt & Whitney when I was working at Pratt & Whitney long ago. And I was engaged in a program called the F-119 program, which provided the engines for the F-22 Raptor. And Lloyd was, he was a vice president of the program, or of military engines at that point in time. Now, most people in that position wouldn't really give you 2 cents any time of the day because they're too important. They live in this ivory tower and they're hard to touch, they're hard to reach, they're hard to communicate with. Some people say, you don't understand 2 levels up, and certainly 2 levels up doesn't understand 2 levels down. But Lloyd came, I reached out to him because I wanted to talk to him because I'm an Air Force vet and he's an Air Force vet. And of course I knew who he was and I wanted to meet this guy. Just fantastic guy. Well, long story short, he became very close, good friend, very good acquaintance of mine. And, he would come out of that ivory tower where other executives wouldn't. And he'd come down and he'd talk to me and he'd talk to other people. And we were just regular managers at that point in time and supervisors. But and if you walked through the aisleway at Pratt & Whitney, which is huge, thousands of people, and he saw you, instead of you having to feel a little shaky going around him, he'd walk up to you and shake your hand. How's your day doing today, Glenn? By your first name. How's everything going? And that created a good relationship with this individual. I think it's so important for every leader out there who's leading a company to remember where their roots came from and to remember to go back. Take a walk back in time and remember when you were on the floor, when you were turning a wrench, when you were machining, when you were pouring plastic, welding, whatever it is. Go back and remember that route that you came from, because you're a regular person just like everybody else. So like what Ron is saying, his dad walked in and said, that person over there is more important. That's how Fig made me feel. I was more important. Just recently we were up at the New England Air Museum and he was the guest speaker. I was in the back, hundreds of people. He saw me and he came over to say hello. How are you doing? How's your career been? And we've had that rapport for so many years. Like Ron's dad, he felt that the other person on the other side was more important. And if you do that as a leader, what happens is people want to contribute. They want to pitch in. They want to help make it easier for you and your company or business or not for profit are always a success, because that's what you rely on, those great resources.
I love that. Charles and I heard something very similar this week at a conference, is leading on the floor, not behind your desk. and that there's a big difference between the two and the reach that you can have when you get out on the floor and outside of your desk. So Charles, who would you say has been the biggest mentor for you and had the most impact on your leadership?
You know, the relationship that I think of first was a very short duration, but it stuck with me for my entire life. It was at my first job out of college, which was at Glacier National Park. I was the housekeeping manager at St. Mary's Lodge and Resort. Highly recommend, by the way. You can go. So, as the housekeeping manager there, I had the responsibility for this entire resort. And I was 22 or 23 years old, and it was a really big responsibility. And I wasn't very good at it. And that became apparent pretty early on because it was overwhelming, and the staff was a lot more seasoned than I was. And so I made a ton of mistakes. Some because I was, kind of young, but some just poor judgment, and I was a bit of a knucklehead. So my boss there was really, really understanding of that. And he spoke to me directly as a friend, but I knew when I did something wrong there, he was disappointed. He made that clear, but not in a way that made me feel bad about myself. He would have no problem calling me into his office and letting me know what I need to do better. And in the same breath, ask if I wanted to go for a hike tomorrow because we had a day off. And when we were out on the hike, it wasn't like, when's he going to bring up the other thing that I messed up on? It wasn't like that. He genuinely wanted me to do better, and he wanted to take care of the resort. And I really appreciated that, because I think when you're younger and when you're being brought up in management, you hear a lot like, you can't be friends with the people that you work with, and you have to keep them at arm's length, and you have to be kind of the same type of thing that Glenn was talking about in reverse, where you have these people that come up through the ivory tower and they're conditioned to not socialize with people that are lower than them. And that was a big, really big lesson for me, because I think that the most important thing you can do as a leader is know as much as possible about everybody that works with you.
That's great. That was a nice story. I like that. I haven't heard that before, so that was the first time for me. So that takes us kind of into what the title of the webinar was, is, characteristics of great leaders. And you guys have already pointed out a few. Charles pointed out feedback. Glenn and Ron have both kind of echoed, listening and really valuing your team. But I'd like to leave our audience with a couple more, tangible ones. What do you really see as great characteristics of leaders, and ones that apply to everyone? We had this come out at WEPCO recently through work that we've done with CCAT on job retention, is that leadership has a lot of different meanings to different members on our team. They receive it in different ways. They're looking for different qualities of leadership. And I think communication is one that definitely bridges that gap. Everybody wants a leader that communicates, but I'd love to hear from the three of you. What do you think are a few more of those characteristics that really create a great, versatile leader?
Anyone? You want to, Joe? I guess I'll go for since you mentioned we were out at WEPCO. Again, I think the most important thing that I've ever learned, or how I address any leadership position I've been in, is that the team comes first, and the team is the most important asset you have. It's not the facilities, it's not your equipment, it's not your IP, it's the team members. And as long as they understand that, and it's not just kind of talked about, you have to figure out ways where they really genuinely know that they're appreciated. And I guess in the great times, it's doing things from bonuses and stuff. But when you can't always do things like that, how do you show that sort of appreciation for them in some way? But making sure that the team realizes that they are what's most important. My job as a leader is to make sure they have every single tool necessary to succeed in their job. And my job is also to obviously represent CCAT well, not do anything to embarrass the team or the company. So, that's what's really key for me, kind of day in and day out. But the communication is very, very key, but just obviously making sure that the team comes first and they have everything that they need and they understand that they can talk to you about those things freely. They're not sitting there internalizing things, that there are things that they actually, their voice matters. And they've got, things that they can be doing outside of any sort of parameters. I don't do that, or I try not to do that as much as I can. There's no silos. Do what you think is best. We all know we need to get from point A to point B. How you get to point B is really up to you. There's all kinds of different individuals. They may take different paths. And that way, actually, you can find out new ways of doing things, or maybe more efficient ways of doing things by saying, we're going to get from point A to point B, and by the way, you're going to do it this way. That would not be a fun environment, an enjoyable environment to be in. So the team is the most important thing day in and day out. And I think, as Glenn had said, being on the shop floor, being able, you need to roll up your sleeves too. You can't ask anything more of your team than you're willing to give yourself. The time, if it's nights, if it's weekends, if it's something extra, you need to go the extra mile. Well, you better be leading by example, or that's only going to go so long. It'll get tiresome.
Very true.
Ron, that's really good. People are number one. I got what I call my big five over here, as far as, trying to tell our leaders what we need to do. And they are empathy, influence, the vision, integrity, and resolve. So I'll briefly tell you why I think that. Empathy, not everybody who comes in every day is on their game. It's just a fact of life. You could be sick, things are going on at home. Empathy for your people, and I think that's where it starts, Ron, where you just left off, is your people are the most important asset that walks out of your plant every day. You need to get those guys back and those ladies back. It's really important. Empathy amongst each other is really important as well. You just have to work with each other. So, it goes back to the seven dwarfs. Influence. I don't think leadership is complete unless you have the ability to influence. I've watched and learned from Charles and Ron, because I'm saying that because you're here and I've watched you. You have the ability to influence your teams and the people around you, even if they're not on your team, to do the right thing, to follow, to think in different ways. That's what I've learned through the webinars. We've had a broad base of different topics. And basically what we're showing there is different ways that people can, improve their business. And that is all influence. Internally, you have to influence your folks, again, to be able to get the job done in the right way. It gets tough, it's hard, it's stressful, a lot of tension, but that's important. You have to be able to influence people. That goes without saying. A vision is great. One of the biggest things that I think is a problem with a lot of businesses is they do have a vision statement or a mission. They have a place that they want to go, but the leader develops the plan to get there. And then again, it goes back to influence. You got to influence everybody to follow that plan, and everybody's got to buy into it, right? So if you have a as-is statement, or where you are today and where you want to be, you can't just put those two things out there. You have to have a plan to go from point A to point B. Integrity is, I call the integrity of the individual really important. Integrity as a leader is important. You have to do what you say and say what you do. If you say you're going to get something done, get it done. Set an example by being the example. Don't not walk the walk and talk the talk. Do it. Get it done. And then the integrity of the whole is a big deal. Goes back again to influence and empathy. You got to keep that team together. Loyalty is unbelievable, and that adhesive, that glue to keep the integrity of the whole together is just as important as the integrity of the individual. And then the last thing is the resolve. If you have a plan, if you have a vision, you have a plan, and you have the empathy and the influence and the integrity of the entire team and the backing, Now it's the resolve and determination to get to make that future state something that is a reality. And it's hard. It takes a lot of work. You're busy from morning to night. I have a big poster in my garage. It says, it shows a picture of a leader or of an eagle, and it says, leaders, don't flock together. You find them one at a time. It's hard to be able to do that work. And all of these big five are what I think guide me at least, and hopefully my team in leadership. Very important.
Well, Glenn, if Charles can come up with 2 more for you, we can give the 7 dwarves each one and make you a nice poster for the office.
Charles will come up with another 5.
Well, I think it would be hard to come up with many more things than what they both shared. I think the most important way to know if you've done a good job as a leader is, I talk to people through the years, and they'll be talking about their job, and they either say it or they come off as like, if I wasn't there, the company would fail, and those types of attitudes. Where a really good leader, I think it's the opposite. I try every day to make WEPCO a place where I can leave at any point, and my presence not being there isn't going to matter. And I think that was really evident over COVID, when I wasn't able to go in and do the things that I would normally do every day or every week. And we've thrived during a time that was really, really difficult. And I'm really happy for that, because everybody else that was there knew what they were supposed to do. And when they didn't know what to do, they were able to make a decision. We were all in new territory, so they were able to rise to the occasion on their own. And that's wonderful. So I think that's really important. And that comes from a place of really being invested in the people around you and wanting them to be better. Which isn't always easy, because sometimes you know what's best for someone, even if they don't know what's best, and driving people into the right position can be difficult, but it's necessary. And that comes from some of the resolve that Glenn was talking about, is you have a mission at hand, and the results are really what matters, and getting everybody to go towards that result can be a challenge. But when you do that and you let everybody know what the intentions are, and if you have credibility with them, then I think that they'll follow you and believe in your leadership, even if they don't always have the vision that you have.
That's good. I think that does show a lot. Charles has said this a few times, is we were preparing for COVID at WEPCO for years. We just didn't know it until COVID happened, that this is what we were preparing our team for and preparing our processes for. All right, so 2 more questions and we'll wrap up. If you had a young leader in your company that you saw potential in, and you wanted to help them grow and help them develop in that leadership path, what is one thing you would really do to encourage them and spark that growth?
Ron, you going to lead us off?
Is that me again? I'm leading home, gives you guys time to think about this stuff. Well, first, I do see some of that within the CCAT organization, and giving them. I would want to. Well, I guess I have to go back a little. I'll just take 30 seconds quick, but I would be asking. Emerging leaders, kind of a tough thing, because it does bring me back to my very first experience when I'm in my early 20s, and I was put into a leadership program at a bank, and I remember like cheering. It was like the greatest thing, coming home and telling my parents how excited. And of course, my dad looked at a critical eye and all that, and said, why do you want to lead? Do you want to be a leader? Did you ask yourself that yet? Do you really want to be a leader? There's a lot of people in organizations, and if you do, why? What do you try? Is it because you want a nice office? Is it because you want to be the kingpin? Why do you want to lead? What makes you different, or in some way where you want to lead? So I would be trying to pry a little bit with this person and saying, what do you have in mind? What are your thoughts about leadership? Why do you want to lead? And I would really kind of try to get to the base of that first before you could really guide them, because they may be saying, well, I just want to get up into a high level so I get paid more. Well, yeah, that's not going to work. You got to find out really almost at their core, what is driving them to be a leader? Because it's very challenging. It's incredibly time consuming. It's pretty much all encompassing. And it's not something, it may look easy at times and you kind of walk away at the end of the day, but you never walk away. And it is never far away from your mind, even when you pop up in the middle of the night. So I would be asking them those kind of questions, but, and then I would be doing my best to mentor them with other leaders in the company. And I think that's very important. It kind of goes a little bit to what Glenn and Charles had said. They need to find out from the different levels within the company what's going on. How did people get to some of the earlier management levels before they got up to the higher levels? What were some of those things? And giving them broad exposure to the company as well. I think as you lead, you can't be just really deep in one particular area. You do have to know what goes on. How does HR work? How are you in tune to your team? What's going on the finance side? What's going on the business development side? And of course, operations, facilities and things. And you almost have to know a lot of different minutia that's going on. And at times, like COVID, all of a sudden you have to suck it all in and make a lot of sense of all of it very quickly to figure out, okay, where are we at most risk? How do we protect against this risk? And where do I really have to pay most attention to my company? I've drifted a bit, but it's really, it comes down to mentoring, really. I mean, that's at the end of the day, is making sure you can guide someone appropriate. But again, to me, the first question to wrap up is asking an emerging leader, why? Tell me why you want to be a leader. What's driving you? And that to me is the most important and first question.
Finding your why. If you want a big desk, there's an easier way to get it than being a leader.
Oh yeah, go buy one.
Much less painful way.
Yeah.
All right, Glenn, your turn.
So Ryan hit the nail on the head. I mean, first you got to, I can't add anything more to that other than saying, Ron, you're right. You got to ask the individual why. I love the commercial that's out there right now. Matthew McConaughey's advertising for a Mercury Aviator. It's a new car, right? And he comes out and he says, first you have to shed everything that you're not. He says, then you can get moving, right? So to a young person, I think the first thing is, do you really understand what leadership's about? Do you really want it? Because you can't be a leader, I really honestly, truly believe, if you don't want it. Some people say, leaders are born. Some people say leaders are, you learn how to leadership. I think a little bit of both of that is true. But the biggest thing that I believe about leadership is you have to want to do it, because it's a lot of work. Okay. And I'm telling you, it's a lot of work to be a good leader. It's a lot of work. There's the technical side, like Ron is talking. You have to learn the entire business. You really should know, not in depth or in entirety, any one function, but you really have to understand how that function works. And you have to understand all the different silos that there are in a company or in a business or in a family or in the service, no matter where you are leading. You have to understand what those silos are. And a leader's job is to bridge those silos, is to bridge the gap, is to try to make sure people are thinking not vertically, but horizontally. And it goes, like I said, even in a family, it goes in business, it goes in the healthcare industry. I don't care where you are, you really have to think along those lines. So a leader is helping people understand horizontal thinking, right? Systemic thinking. Peter Senge, if you've never read him, is a really good book. He called it The Fifth Discipline, and it's about systemic thinking. And I think that is a big sign of a leader. And lastly, I would say this: if I were talking to a young person, I would say, let's talk about what leadership looks like, so you can visualize it. A lot of people in the old days used to think leadership was like a pyramid, and leaders were at the top, and then managers were sort of in the middle, and then all the workforce was down at the bottom. The latest thinking is take that and flip that pyramid over. And, the leaders are really at the bottom and all the people come first. And Ron, again, you alluded a lot to that about how the people are number one. I think both are give a upper and a level, upper and lower level. And I don't think that's right in leadership. Here's the picture. I think leadership's like a dartboard, okay? And in the center is the bullseye. That's leadership. Be careful if you want to be in that point, because everybody wants to throw the dart to the bullseye. And if you want to be there, you're going to have to be able to take the darts. Those outer rings, people are always shooting the darts at those places too. But you've got to be prepared for it. You've got to want it. So getting back to it, everything that Ron said, absolutely. Why do you want to do it? And then second, what I would add to it is, if you want to do it and you really have that desire, you gotta have a desire. You really have to want to do it.
It's a painful looking analogy, but it's a good one, Glenn. I like that. The dartboard.
I mean,
all right, Charles.
Well, there is a lot of pain associated with being a young leader, I think. A lot of young leaders come from a place because they're highly skilled in a certain area. And so upper management in their infinite wisdom says, well, this person's a really good machinist. Let's make them in charge of other machinists. And, being able to get a machine to do something that you want to do and getting a person to do something that you want to do are completely different. And, I think that Ron and Glenn especially can attest to how really simple it is to teach people skills as far as being able to manipulate technology, but helping people to understand how other humans work is incredibly difficult. And so I see a lot of frustration in young leaders because of that. So one of the things that I try to do when I'm working with someone that's a new leader is I try to be a resource and let them know what the end result is. And then I try to stay out of the way for the most part. I don't, for me to go and say, like, here's where we want to be, and so these are the steps to get there, I don't think that helps in development. Now, I may know exactly what needs to be done in order to achieve this result, and I could tell you exactly what to do, but that's a very, very short-term way of thinking. So I think the best way to do it is to provide people with results and then make sure they have all the tools and resources that they need, and then see what happens. So promoting failure in young leaders, as counterintuitive as that sounds, is really the best way to get them to grow, to challenge them. And that can be a really super frustrating process. They can be frustrated with the process, frustrated with me as a leader, frustrated internally. But when I look back at what little success I've had in my life, it's all been because of that. I've had to deal with something that was super challenging, and I got through it one way or the other. And I either was able to come out on the other side and say, wow, because I did this, that worked, I'm going to do that again. Or more often than not, I was like, wow, I really shouldn't have done that, and I'm going to not do that again. But so I could sit here and tell you all of my mistakes, and maybe you could write them down and whatever. But until you experience that failure and experience that frustration, I don't think you can learn as well. So that would be what I would say, is to really, results as your North Star, but really it's all about the journey.
What he's leaving out in there was my journey of making PPE when I destroyed his office to do that. And I failed miserably for a good month there. I learned a lot, but I failed miserably for a month.
Yeah, but like, so if, I gave you my opinion on things, Amanda, but if I was to say, like, you have to do these things, I think it would have been a totally different experience for you. And yeah, maybe we lost a few weeks of what our potential productivity could have been and quality and those types of things. But where we're at now and what you were able to get out of that, I think is invaluable. And I would gladly trade a couple weeks of productivity for a lifetime of learning.
few less gray hairs too, but we learned a lot. It was good. All right, so Charles, I'm going to let you start off the last question for us.
Right.
Hopefully you leave some answers for Ron and Glenn. But
Let's see.
what leadership books would you suggest? You are a big reader. We do a lot of reading at Webco. I spend a lot of my marketing budget keeping your books supplied. So what are some good suggestions for leadership books?
So first of all, as a leader, you should be reading, and you should encourage everybody around you to read, and preferably reading the same books as each other so you can discuss it. Because just like anytime you go off to and I know I'm not answering the question, but when you go off to a conference or something like that, it's great, and everybody walks out of these things, or you close the book and like, that was fantastic, you know, my life has changed. But until you start to discuss it and live it and have people hold you accountable for the takeaways in there, it doesn't really mean as much. So that being said, I feel like the #1 best business book that everybody should read is the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I read that years ago, and I didn't realize what a profound effect it had on me. And we read it as a team this past year. And I realized in there, I was like, oh, I do that. And I do that. And I was like, oh, I don't do that. But I remember reading about it. So maybe I should start. And it's just such a tremendous, tremendous book on the way, how you prioritize things and how you think about things and how you should act. And habit is such an important thing. I think your behaviors and your habits are what really set you apart in every aspect of life. So I can name a bunch, but I'm only going to name that one and save the rest of the library for this.
All right, Glenn, what would be your pick?
Wow, you know, Charles and I are from the same mold. I think if I had to recommend one book, 7 Habits, and I'd add the 8th, he's got the 8th. It's about people, you know, using people the right way as well. Steve Covey is just phenomenal. He's been a leader for a long time. So I would recommend that book. Let me go on to say Dave Ramsey is another one. If you've never heard of Dave Ramsey, yeah, definitely take a look at him. He's got so many books. One of them is Entre Leadership, it's called. It really is about leading on so many different levels. But Dave Ramsey is a phenomenal individual in our midst that I think is highly underrated. Another person is Peter Senge, definitely another person who teaches you how to think. I think that's a big deal. The thinkers, you know, are few and far between these days. We follow a boilerplate and we don't go outside the boilerplate, and as a result, we follow the same path that everybody else has followed. Thinking and critical thinking is extremely important today because we're entering into a different manufacturing period than we have ever entered in our lifetime. But the last 2 books, I'm sorry, I'm rambling with other things, was the QBQ. Have you heard of the QBQ? Anybody out there? Okay. It's a question behind the question. Fantastic book, quick read. You know, I don't want to give you what it's all about because I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's a really good book. And then the last one is if you've also never read it, and these are just basic, fundamental. These should be read by everybody. Is Who Moved My Cheese? Who Moved My Cheese is a really good book on trying to understand business people. It's a real simple read, but they all have very good lessons that we can take away from.
Okay, Ron, you got to give us
a to add to the Webco library.
What was that?
All of our books are ancient. So the Glenn's book and my book are all like 30, 40 years old.
No, I have
good messages, right? Last a long time. So
I was actually hoping, Amanda, you did call me last because I got to throw a total curveball into this one. But yeah, the Dave Ramsey books are good. QBQ is great, and Glenn brought up Who Moved the Cheese, but Our Iceberg is Melting, you know, was interesting. But I don't know, it's going to be a little unpopular, but I find it hard to subscribe to a lot of it. I mean, we've all done a lot of reading over the years, and I can say there's interesting points, but I take away a lot more in a particular meeting that I may have been in during the week, or even a discussion like this. So there's guiding principles. And to be honest with you, most of the stuff that I end up reading is more around mindfulness, being in the present, If I get myself set right and I'm focused the right way, then I can achieve a lot more. I'm more in tune to my team and what's going on. If I'm just trying to execute off of an interesting type of principles that were laid out in a book, even though I may have thought it was a really good book, it falls flat on me. It's just me personally. I guess that's why we have these panels, and we're not always the same in our direction. But I just find that reading things that help me to be grounded and mindful of the present. I can't imagine what's going on. Even you, Amanda, what's on your desk right now during this last hour. Yet we have to focus on this right now. We're going to do. I'd be fumbling if I was saying, "Oh man, I'm more worried about what's happening after this instead of what's going on right now." And I think we're all victims of that at times. No matter how perfect we try to be, we're really not in the moment. And that has a lot to do with spiritualness, but frankly, it has a lot to do with business. If you're not trying to figure out your challenge at hand right now, and you're saying, "Yeah, I'm kind of focused, but I'm really not focused. I'm really focused on what I need to do at 4 o'clock," you're done. You will fizzle out. So though we've all read management books over the year, I don't subscribe to a lot of them. I wouldn't even turn necessarily a new leader or emerging leader that way, because I think it could be confusing. I think it could be misleading in their style. And it's just like, look, you really need to get in tune to people, well, yourself, and then people, and then the business or industry you're in. All this stuff will come. Don't get caught up, even, I would say, in the academic even side of it, because it's not how life works. It's not how business operates every minute and every hour of the day. So I'm sorry to say, I was glad you said, because I knew Charles and Glenn. I love hearing about the stuff that they're reading, and I usually do write it down and try to find what the stuff they're doing, because they are always leaders in that field. But it's not what I typically subscribe to.
That's great insight, Ron.
Yep.
Really.
That's a great perspective. A great way to end for us, Ron. Thank you. That was great.
You know, the best part about that for me, Ron, is it kind of highlights what, like, one of the things about, and I know we're ending, but one of the things about being a leader is sometimes you have to say the unpopular thing, right? And sometimes you have to go in your own direction. And it would have been really easy for you to throw out some, business book by somebody, but the way that you answered that question was one of the things I think makes you great. So, well done.
I concur. Definitely, absolutely right. And that's why Ron is down there at CCAT making such big differences at CCAT over the past, what are we, a year and a half now, Ron?
2 years, November 1st.
Whoa, 2 years. Time flies when we're having fun.
Congratulations.
Amanda, I need this clip though, because I've never heard that sort of compliment from
I'll get that to you, Rod. We'll clip that just for you.
Too. I'm going to remind them in the future when they're on my case about something.
Well, thank you so much to the three of you. Thank you for everyone that joined us in the webinar and online. And if you would like to hear more from these three, they will be hosting another Advanced Manufacturers Employer Partnership webinar through CCAT next Thursday at 12 o'clock. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Everyone.